Thanks, Miko. A question particularly for Steve, I think, although others may have comments as well. Is there anything that you can say about the development of Palestinian archaeology as a way of rediscovery or recovery of Palestinian history and heritage? And linked with that, someone else writes, I was very taken with Sebastia when I was living in Tulkarm last year. Are there Roman ruins there in danger of being destroyed by Judaization?
I'll take the last part first. Sebastia is somewhat north of Nablus in the West Bank, and it's a very famous site. Like all these sites, and this is another point I'm really trying to emphasize here, with multiple layers of really rich history. There's not, sometimes when you look at these very Zionist archaeological sites, they're always talking about the Jewish bedrock. as if history ends when you get to the point where you find Hebrew writing on a stone. And it doesn't, actually. There are many layers in archaeology. They call it stratigraphy, the different layers of history. You look down below the earth and you find these different strata, right? And Sebastia is a really rich site. I mean, there's whole segments of layers. And actually it's lying in ruins right now because it's on the border between areas B and C, which are the Israeli designated zones that came out of the Oslo Accords, which say there's partial. In Area A, as maybe many of you probably know this, but in Area A would be the large cities of the West Bank, Palestinian cities of the West Bank, where there's full Palestinian self-rule, with many exceptions. Areas B, shared arrangements with Israeli security, has some arrangements there. Area C, complete Israeli control. Sebastia is the archaeological site is right on that borderline, and so no one goes there now. To go to your other question, though, say it again, and then I had something.
The other question was about Palestinian archaeology.
Oh yeah, Palestinian archaeology. You have to keep the broader context in mind here. A lot of Palestinians have learned that the last thing you want to do is uncover something that could be potentially traced to Jewish history anywhere on your land. See the point? You actually, for many Palestinians, at least from what I've read and in my talking with Palestinians, they don't want to go digging in the land because they're afraid that something might be found. And then it will be, their land will be taken, just as it is in Silwan, just as it is outside of El Bir and Ramallah, just as it is in Susia. The list goes on, and will be turned into an Israeli settlement project. So there's great resistance. At the same time, there of course has been archaeology. There has been a program, Birthright had a program, and what they were primarily focused on was uncovering the sort of middle period, the Islamic period, and after the Ottoman period. But I really think what you find, at least in my experiences spending a lot of time in Palestine, is more important are the heritage projects about keeping Palestinian culture alive in the context of this vicious occupation. And it seems to me that's where people are putting more of their energy. There's no need to go back into history to legitimate the existence of the people today. They're there right now, and their rights should be recognized.
Thanks. A question for Miko. What things can I tell my friends going on Birthright trips, or what should they know? And you can take this in the context of Judaization in particular, or perhaps go more broad.
I don't think you have to tell them anything. I know quite a few young American Jews who went on that trip and came back appalled by how disgusting it was and the level of propaganda. And so I think if they, unless they're completely blind, they can see for themselves that it's propaganda, that it's designed to get them to see one very narrow perspective and nothing else. But having said that, I would encourage them to refuse to go, not to send their children on these things, because if they want to go and visit the country, that's great. Go on your own, go with friends. But when you go and somebody's paying for your trip, then that person has a reason for wanting to pay for your trip. And so it's probably not a good idea. So that would be my recommendation. Just not to go on that particular trip. There was an interesting, just a little anecdote. I live in a tiny little community adjacent to San Diego, and I got an email from one of the city council members telling me that the entire city council, which are all volunteers, it's a small city, were invited to go on this trip to Israel and what I thought. And she sent me the agenda, the itinerary, and it was a wonderful trip. So I told her it's a wonderful trip. At the same time, it's like a $12,000 trip. So, do you want to know what you're not going to see? And so she got curious and she asked me, yes, what is it that I'm not going to see? And I told her, I said, okay, here goes. You're going to regret you asked me to do this, but here's what you're not going to see. So that's the price. When you go on somebody else's dime, then you're going to see what they want you to see.
And we should keep in mind that this someone else is not just anyone else, but it's Sheldon Adelson, who is the main backer of Birthright, who has a very particular history in the Republican Party, as we all read on the front page of the New York Times last week.
I did a video on the Birthright mega event, and I would recommend that everyone thinking of going on Birthright watch this video to see what kind of propaganda they're going to get and what it will do to what it could do to your mind. I had one participant describe the trip as Ziowana or Ziocane. And then, of course, it is like the ultimate Jewish sex vacation. I mean, Sheldon Adelson said that he's funding it to prevent assimilation, and so I actually interviewed Michael Steinhardt, the multimillionaire hedge funder who's one of the other tycoons behind it, and I said, a lot of marriages could come out of this, right? And he said, what do we need marriages for? Why not tonight? And promiscuity is really encouraged on this trip, including with Israeli soldiers who are active duty. I am sure there are some stories out there about, abuse that haven't come out because of the aggressive nature of some of the Israeli soldiers towards the young women. And I witnessed it to some degree on my trip, but it's gotten much more aggressive now. They're pushing the club scene, they're pushing, anything they can to promote generational continuity. This is one of the only successful forms of promoting generational continuity among American Jews. So it's important for them to know what they're getting into, why Sheldon Adelson's pumping that money in there, and what they will do. And then most importantly, if you're going to go on the trip, stay and go to the other side of the wall, at least go see the wall. Once you get out of the atmosphere of Birthright, which is just a hypercharged atmosphere with very little sleep and just, lots of, Ziowana, the fumes of Ziowana are just intoxicating. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience it was like that. Once you get out of that atmosphere, you're going to be shocked by what you see. This trip aims to build a lifelong connection between American Jews or diaspora Jews and Israel. And for me, it worked, just not in the way that they wanted. And many of those who went on my trip have the same experience, so I think it is important to get in their ear and just brief them before and after.
Just one additional point on Birthright. Folks should know when you talk to young people who are thinking of going, there is an organization called Birthright Unplugged that was started some years ago by young Jews who went on the trip and were appalled, as Miko has said, about the level of propaganda they were subjected to, and they took the opportunity to create the possibility for real trips to see all sides of the wall, if you will. We have time, I think, for just one more question, and I'm going to shape this a somewhat different question than the others we've gotten. We've been talking today about a phenomenon of, whether we call it Judaization, call it ethnic cleansing, but what we're really seeing is that the impact is on people, much more than simply an ideological formulation. Could each of you, in sort of as a wrap-up, talk for just a minute or two on how you see the need for us in this country, as we struggle to change U.S. policy, to end U.S. military aid, to end the U.S. protection of Israel at the United Nations, etc., as we support BDS, how do we balance the work that goes to the immediate question of people's lives that are on the line, house demolitions, destruction of towns, etc., versus the broad ideological questions of Judaization, Zionism, ethnic cleansing, and the complex set of ideas that underpins these particular actions that we're fighting right now?
Well, I think they're connected. I think they're clearly connected. I think one is the result of the other. Probably the more stories that are told, personal, individual stories of people, the better it is, because that's what we relate to. We relate to the stories. I think it's also important that we ask the tough questions. Why is Judaization a good thing? Why is it needed? Why does the Galilee have to have more Jews? Why do we need that kind of, they call it a balance. The purpose of the Judaization project is to create a balance in the demographics. That's what they say. Why is that needed? What's wrong with the Galilee being mostly Palestinian? What's wrong with Jerusalem being mostly Palestinian? Prove that we are here and we are Jews and we are here and we are Jews and this is our land and so forth, and destroy absolutely every other bit of history and archaeology, and except for those few little bits of archaeology that do have Hebrew writing on it. You know, this is kind of an obsession that you have to wonder about. Why are people so obsessed with this, number one? And number two, why is it being supported by Americans? Why does a small group of lunatic Jews in Palestine, these racists, have to be funded by this? And of course, the answer is, the reason this is so important for them, the reason they're obsessed, is because they have no legitimacy. The issue in Israel, the problem that Israel faces is not a threat of security, but it's a threat of legitimacy. And so if it's not the Holocaust, then it's King David. If it's not King David, then it's King Solomon. If it's not King Solomon, then it's, it's always this other thing. And this insistence of being recognized as a Jewish state and the state of the Jews and the land of the Jews and all that nonsense. Why is it important if you have legitimacy? Obviously they don't have legitimacy, and this is the fight that they're fighting. And again, it ties back to the lives of people. It ties back to the policies. All these things are connected. And I would strongly encourage people, especially in what I heard here this weekend and what I hear in a lot of places, is people say, well, yes, but my Jewish friends are so-and-so. And suddenly there's a rift between me and my Jewish friends because I tell them these things. We're talking about lives of people. We're talking about a reality that shouldn't be tolerated. And if people tolerate this, then that's their choice. It's not something that we can necessarily influence. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy task. Telling these stories has to be done. I mean, something that has to be done. Opposing the policies is something that has to be done. And recognizing that what happens in Israel, or what's been happening in Palestine the last 65, 70 years is a crime. All of this has to be done, and it has to be done by us. And so I would recommend probably doing a fair share of all of these different things in order to get the point across.
Thank you. I think that the tactics of the movement that we define around Palestine solidarity are working. And if they haven't worked, or there hasn't been a tipping point, it's for two reasons. One, just history. I mean, I'm a product of history. I'm here for the same reason a lot of people in my generation are, just because we went through a process of Second Intifada, second invasion of Lebanon, and then Cast Lead was the real breaking point, which released BDS across the country. The second reason is repression. Repression on campus, repression, what we saw after 9/11, roundups of Muslim leaders, Islamophobia, FBI repression, NYPD repression. The terror in Dallas is still there from the Holy Land Foundation trial. There are many communities in this country that are still traumatized by this experience. These are the communities that will lead the struggle for the liberation of Palestine from this country, and they are Arab and Muslim, Arab American and Muslim Americans. We have to be their allies because this country needs to be changed as well. This country still has a long way to go towards being a real democracy. So the two struggles are interlinked, and that needs to be recognized. My heroes are the Students for Justice in Palestine who are leading divestment resolutions on campus, and they need community support from you guys. They need allies from the community. My heroes are the people who are bringing this into institutions that can't be controlled by money and astroturfing, like PCUSA, like the United Methodist Church, like ECUSA. There is a movement that is just growing. Something is happening out there, and these institutions will eventually divest fully from Israeli apartheid. It's only a matter of time. And so I really think the issue isn't what are we doing wrong, the issue is how do we keep doing more of what we're doing. It's about remaining steadfast. It's about paying the price you're going to pay in your community for speaking out for an unpopular cause that's increasingly popular. It's about being savvy and demonstrating new tactics. It's about doing what people did at the 2012 Democratic Convention, shouting down with a nay vote, a no vote, the resolution for an undivided Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and exposing the completely avaricious nature of the and soulless nature of the Democratic Party. And that will happen again at the 2016 Democratic National Convention. It's about hounding your politicians. It's about, listening to the experience of Cindy and Craig Corey and what they've gone through in trying to work this system, and continuing to do so. But I really am very confident about this moment and about the movement that's galvanized around BDS. Something is really happening out there, and you guys are a part of it, and I'm really proud to be here right now with you guys and on this panel.
Thank you.
I don't think I can add anything to that, but I'll add one thing. I really think it's important for us to be questioning. I guess I want to just respond in the context of what I was talking about, to these exclusive notions of identity and history and heritage. I want us all to question those and to think about what its alternative is, that actually we are all part of multiplicities and we're all plural, and we have to figure out how to live together across those multiplicities and pluralities. And then more practically, there are a lot of groups out there now working on the issues I was talking about, these heritage theme parks and archaeological sites. Emek Sheva, the Israeli Archaeology organization, needs your support. You should be supporting them. It's really important. And also the communities that are being displaced by these parks. For example, Silan has a support community that I spent some time with, really amazing people holding on against this sort of onslaught of Elad and the settler groups backed by the military. These communities deserve our support, but in the end, I agree with what both my colleagues just said, that ultimately it's about ending the suppression, and that's what we have to work towards. Thank you.